2016 is before you, members of Parliament, for your consideration and adjudication. And it pleases me to report that it is balanced. It includes notes of elucidation, income and expenditures per ministry, capital expenditures budget, as well as the multi-annual budget from 2017 to 2022. The draft budget 2016 before you has been scrutinized by the CFT, and their preliminary suggestions and recommendations have been fully incorporated into the budget you presently have before you for your consideration. The total income projected for 2016 amounts to 468 million guilders. Total expenses are projected in 2016 of 442 million guilders. The income projected in 2016 budget is based on reasonable certainty. It does not include any income based on promises to take measures to generate more income to be able to balance the budget 2016. This approach is a departure from all previous budgets produced by St. Martin since it became country, and those budgets accumulated deficits for the past 5 years of 60 million because the promised measures were either not taken or did not produce the expected additional income to balance the budget, hence continuous annual deficits that amounted to 60 million. I labeled the budget 2016 as a shotgun budget, to the amusement of many. But in actual fact, the 2015 budget, which was not approved by CFT, was also a shotgun budget because it was subjected to the instruction from the Kingdom Council of Ministers instructing St. Martin in its budget to do XYZ or else. That budget in 2015, as well as the budget 2016, was under that shotgun instruction. The instruction was, pay off your debts that have been increasing year after year, or else. Attempts were made to silence the shotgun instructions from The Hague in budget 2015, but a satisfactory formula could not be found to accomplish this. And further efforts to finalize budget 2015, because that formula could not be found, was abandoned. St. Martin, therefore, does not have an approved budget by CFT for the year 2015, and as a result, no monies could have been loaned to invest in capital expenditures for 2015. What was the actual problem, Madam Chair Lady? From 2010 to 2015, St. Martin has been accumulating debts in the form of budget deficits year after year for a total of 60 million. In addition thereto, premiums deducted from civil servants' salaries and owed to the health insurer USZV and the pension fund APS were also not being paid out to these institutions, but were kept by government and used instead to pay government's operational expenses. By doing this year after year, the debt to USZV accumulated up to 83 million guilders, and to APS approximately 60 million guilders by the end of 2015. St. Martin had built up a total accumulated debt of over 200 million guilders, and the bill was now being presented with a shotgun instruction to pay now or else. In 2015, the former government offered to sell the new government administration building to USZV and APS for 40 million guilders and requested them to refinance the remainder of the debt owed by government, which would have ended up to be about 103 million guilders. The problem with that approach was that financing the remaining debt of 103 million guilders after selling the new government building was nothing else than asking for a new loan to pay off an old loan and to start all over again with a new loan for the same debt. The CFT did not fall for this and rejected it out of hand, because the instruction given to St. Martin was pay off your debt and not finance your debt again. The former government then gave up on any further efforts to balance the budget of 2015, and as a result, we do not have a 2015 budget approved by CFT. In the budget for 2016, which you have before you, the puzzle was solved as follows. The new government building was sold to USZV for an amount of 45 million guilders. 22.5 million of this 45 million guilders that USZV will then have to pay for government for the purchase of the building would be used and applied to reduce the debt from USZV on government. An additional 19.5 million of the remaining 22.5 million would then be paid to reduce the debt of APS. APS, according to the arrangement we made, would also purchase the lots to the west of the new government administration building for 4.5 million, with the obligation to build a multi-parking garage next to the new administration building. On government's part, a commitment was made to pay the full amount owed to St. Martin from the division of the assets of the Netherlands Antilles to APS, which amounts to about 58 million, 60 million, and to pay an additional 20 million a year for the next 3 years to USZV. Part of the agreement is that government will lease the new administration building from USZV at a rent of 6% of the investment USZV made. Should be understood that generally return on capital of 6% is perceived to be a healthy and good return. With this, debts paid, problem solved, and to make certain that the building is not out of reach of St. Martin or the people of St. Martin, part of the arrangement was that government will have the option to repurchase that building at any time it so desires. It's a win-win-win, Madam Chairlady. Why is it a win-win-win? A member of Parliament expressed concern during the discussions we had about the budget previously about the state of the reserves for pensioners. In 2014, the reserves coverage at the pension fund was insufficient. It amounted in 2014 to 97.6%. In 2015, the coverage of reserves of pension went down to 96.8%. With this arrangement, the coverage for reserves at the APS, by paying down $19.5 million on a debt that was qualified as doubtful in terms of its collectability. They received $19.5 million, or will when the deal is done. They will have a parcel of land that they can exploit and operate and generate income. And with this arrangement, the coverage to suit the concern of the senior citizen who expressed this concern in Parliament jumps from 96.7% to 101%. And during this year, we're going to continue to pursue pension reform, and the pension reform will further, once executed, increase again with multiple percentages and make certain that the fund is sound, viable, sustainable, and there should not be any more concern by senior citizens anywhere as far as their pension is concerned. By doing this also, this undoubtful debt in the books of APS regains good standing. And the same thing holds good for USZV. It too has in its book a claim on government which prior to this was categorized as doubtful. With the sale of the government building to USZV, which was also the same plan that the previous government had in trying to reduce the debt. With the sale of that building, immediately $22.5 million on the debt is paid down to USZV. And it no longer needs to worry about getting a fair and a certain return on its investment, because the monies that it invests in the government building, the lease payments by the government leasing the building back from them, gives them a fixed long-term return on investment of 6%, which in today's world, today's financial world, is a healthy rate of return compared to investing your capital on the stock market and being exposed to the roller coaster risks associated with that. Compare that with this fixed return. I said it's a win-win-win, because from the part of government, it pays off its debt. It gets rid of the instruction that the Kingdom Council of Ministers imposed on the St. Martin to balance its budget. And with your help, if this budget is passed, we would also have removed any kind of concern that it might be on the part of the CFT to approve the budget which we're asking Parliament to approve. The benefits are numerous. When I say they're numerous, if the budget is passed as presented, balanced and approved by CFT, St. Martin would get access to its capital budget. The rule is, if your budget is not balanced, you cannot borrow to make capital expenditures. Capital expenditures and investment on St. Martin, which last year could not take place because we didn't have a balanced budget, that if this budget, which is balanced, is approved, automatically you would have access to invest funds totaling some additional 55 million, because you have about 17 or 16 million remaining from 2014 that is available for investment, another 17 million that has already been committed, but there's about 38 million new investments that you'll be able to make by obtaining the right to borrow. Now, this should not be poo-pooed in any way, and I'll tell you why. We're in for a hard time. In the third quarter of 2015, the GDP numbers shown for the United States dropped to 0.7%, while there were predictions before that the growth of the GDP in the United States would be about 3 to 4%. All of a sudden, a shock came with the revelation of the numbers of the third quarter of 2015, showing that it dropped to 0.7%. And the outlook going forward is that maybe the GDP growth in the United States will be about 1.5%. I make this comparison because, as we all know, if the United States sneezes, St. Martin catches a cold. So it's crucial that we obtain access to the capital expenditures budget and could borrow to invest, because that would balance things out substantially for St. Martin. In fact, it will contribute to a growth of GDP in St. Martin by investing that money. You'll be able to create new jobs, more jobs, give out more contracts, create economic activity, which we're going to need, and so doing, possibly expand our economy. And as you know, we've always been mentioning, and we were asked, what can we do to expand our economy? Approve the budget. By approving this budget and removing as few possibilities as there might be for the CFT to throw a monkey wrench in the process, based on the CFT law, St. Martin will have access, theoretically, have a right, theoretically, to borrow up to $1.2 billion based on the interest norm in the CFT law. I know you'd be crazy to do so, because you also have to have and act prudent in whatever you do. You might have that right, but the IMF, for small economies such as ours, have been advancing the idea that your debt to GDP ratio should not exceed, or it is prudent to not exceed 50% debt to GDP. I warn you, there's some people who interpret it differently and who say, no, we now have a debt to GDP ratio of about 33, 36%, and we shouldn't go much higher than that. And I say baloney. That we need more room, because the investments which should have taken place at the start of country St. Martin did not take place. We presently have a debt to GDP ratio that is almost, I would say, the best in the world. To move that up a couple of percentage points, perhaps 4 or 5 or 6% of the GDP, would give us capital to be able to make that investment that should have been made since 10-10-10, and a request that came in asking St. Martin to voluntarily limit its right to borrow to about 40% of GDP was cast out of hand and was told the law is the law, and we're sticking to what the CFT law says, which is always used against us when others want something. Now, if that's what the CFT law says, that's what we're going to abide by, and expect that people will accept that we are responsible enough to gauge to what limit we should raise that to. And I am quoting the IMF when it says it could be 50% safely. Now comes the opportunity to be able to access capital, to make investments in St. Martin, to be able to strengthen St. Martin's economic foundation. And when I say strengthen economic foundation, I first and foremost think not in roads or in buildings per se, but people. People are the best investment that we can make for St. Martin, because they when they achieve the necessary level and training that they need, will have a multiplier effect in terms of what can be done for St. Martin and how we can support St. Martin. That I believe, and for that reason, I have started a sidetrack, as you probably well know, and I believe I got most of your support for that, to start a law school and a comparative law training. I see that as extremely important because 5-6 years from now we could start getting those human resources that we need for here, not those we borrow temporarily, for here in St. Martin. We also need that for finances. We need a whole cadre of people for finances, and that's a next thought. But there's a limited amount that you can do. But training people in finances to be able to support your government apparatus and to support the economy is essential. And so there are others. I am saying if we have the access, we should invest in people. That's the best investment that we can make. By approving this budget, you will also be setting the stage for budget 2017. By monitoring the budget for 2016 in such a fashion that the result that we have in mind is attained. If that is done, and if the foundation is laid for budget 2017, and we can one more time, 2016, 2017, 2018, also produce a balanced budget, guess what? We will have the right to ask the CFT to please vacate, remove yourself. We would then have the right to put our own CFT in place. Now, isn't that an ideal, something that's worth pursuing? Something that we all long for, talk about, but to achieve it, you got to do. You've got to make the decisions that's going to get you from point A to point B, and such a decision is approve the budget. If you care about this process, approve the budget. It's not a budget that's going to win a beauty contest. Far from it. I admit that. But I also ask you to consider the time that we have.